The news of the morning, President Trump defending his decision to downplay COVID-19 severity in the early days of the pandemic, despite knowing full well the deadly potential of the disease. The Washington Post released audio recordings yesterday of interviews between veteran journalist Bob Woodward and the president. In March, Mr. Trump said he chose to, quote, play down the threat of COVID-19 because he didn't want to create panic. Woodward was interviewing the president for a new book called Rage. It's going to be published by Simon Schuster, which is a division of ViacomCBS. Paula Reid reports on some of the book's most startling revelations.
On February 7th, Bob Woodward spoke to the president, who had just talked with Chinese President Xi Jinping the day before. In audio recordings obtained by the Washington Post, Mr. Trump admitted to Woodward the severity of the virus.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5 per, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%, so this is deadly stuff.
Our country is stronger today.
Even after acknowledging the virus was airborne, the president held at least 7 indoor rallies. And despite knowing the flu was not more deadly, Mr. Trump continued to say otherwise.
We're finding very little problem. Now, you treat this like a flu.
By downplaying the threat, Americans lost time to prepare.
We're prepared and we're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm, it will go away.
Then in March, Mr. Trump told Woodward the virus was a threat to younger Americans.
Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob. Just today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. It's not just older young people, to plenty of young people.
But then in the following weeks, the president was urging states and schools to reopen, saying this.
We'd like to see the schools open early next season and on time. It's incredible it's very unique how the children aren't affected.
And in a shocking admission, on the same day the death toll in the United States reached 265, the president volunteered to Woodward that he was intentionally misleading the country.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you.
Sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
One study from May estimates that shutdown delays in the early days of the pandemic could have cost up to 54,000 lives.
We would have had a stay-at-home mandate put in place, all of which we did, and we did it about as early as any American state, but we would have done it earlier and undoubtedly would have saved lives.
But on Wednesday, the president doubled down on his decision to lie about the severity of the virus.
The fact is, I'm a cheerleader for this country. I love our country, and I don't want people to be frightened. I don't want to create panic, as you say.
Mr. Trump's Democratic rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, blasted the president.
He knew how dangerous it was. And while this deadly disease ripped through our nation, he failed to do his job on purpose. It was a life and death betrayal of the American people.
And Paula Reid joins us now from the White House. Paula, I've already started to see the president and some of his supporters going on the defensive with regards to these quotes that the president of the United States gave to Bob Woodward. A lot of it seems to stem from the fact that the president did not want to panic the American people, and they're pointing to some of the actions that he took, like partially closing down travel to China. But it strikes me as a strange line of attack to take when the United States and the world is facing one of the biggest calamities in decades. And I remarked to somebody else yesterday that I was looking back at Winston Churchill's speech from May of 1940 when he said this to the British people: "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat." He also went on to say, "Come then, let us go forward together with our united strength." The president saying that he didn't want to panic people, that seems to be the line that they're going with. Yet over the last couple of weeks, all the president has done is talk about the panic that is existing in some of America's cities and how he's the only one to fix it. So I want to hear from you, if you're hearing from the White House, that is going to be the continued response, the continued defensive posture of this White House.
Yeah, absolutely. He's doubling down. He's not hiding from the story. Let's just take a moment to appreciate yesterday. His press secretary came out to take questions, but then the president opened up a press event. Now, he was there to announce something else, but after making his announcement, he looked at the reporters and said, "Any questions?" He did not hide from this story, and that's because he believes that he has a robust defense, that this is what any leader would do. He disputes the characterization that he was misleading the country. Instead, he says he's doing what any good leader would do. He was trying not to instill panic or fear. But as you noted, not just over the past weeks or months, but the past few years, throughout the president's campaigns, throughout this administration, the president has leaned in to people's fears, particularly on issues like immigration, crime, even low-income housing. So in this instance, to say that, oh, no, I wanted to play it down so as not to scare people, it just contradicts what we've seen over the past several years.
And from those recordings, we hear that he had a very clear understanding of how contagious COVID-19 was and how dangerous it was, how it wasn't just older people with pre-existing conditions that would be vulnerable, younger people as well. I presume he got a lot of that information probably from some of the public health professionals and experts that he had been meeting with, that had been trying to share that information with him. So I'm wondering, you know, if we have been hearing from any members of the public health community, perhaps even people who had tried to inform him about his public message when it comes to COVID-19. Now that they hear, according to these recordings, he knew very well what we were dealing with, what he calls the China virus.
That's right. Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci has come out. Fauci is actually also referenced in the Woodward book. In that book, according to Woodward's account, Fauci has described the president as, quote, being on a separate channel, having an attention span that is like a minus number, and also that his sole purpose is to get reelected. Now, Fauci has disputed the characterization of his words in the Woodward book. Yesterday, he said that those are based on secondhand sources. And interestingly, he actually defended President Trump. He said that he did not believe that the president had actually distorted the threat of coronavirus. He also said that he believed the president's public remarks, that they actually reflected what they were discussing behind the scenes at the time. Now, he was directly asked, do you think that the president was downplaying the severity of the virus? Fauci said no. Now, I'm sure many people are asking, how can you reconcile what you hear on those tapes with what we're hearing from one of the most respected men in America, Dr. Fauci? It just seems like they're contradictory statements. What I have seen, though, over the past 3.5 years of covering this White House is that there are people who are willing to think one thing and perhaps say another publicly to stay in the fold. There are military professionals, there are public health officials who want to stay in the president's orbit. They want to be in the so-called room where it happens, right? Because they believe they can affect change, protect the president from his worst instincts. And it appears that is likely what we're seeing here with Dr. Fauci. Instead of, reiterating what's already been said in the Woodward book, what the president said himself, instead of dragging the president on that, he appears to be kind of giving him a pass in the hopes that he can focus again on trying to get a vaccine. Fauci even says in his interview, he says he's concerned that the Woodward book is small frame and that it's distracting people from, quote, the big picture of what's going on.
Paula, are you hearing at all from your sources, even on background, that there are some people in the White House, around the President of the United States, who are thinking now, what if? In other words, what if the president had simply suggested that everyone wear a mask back in March? He could have gone on the attack with governors that he doesn't like or with members of Congress that he doesn't like, but if he had just simply suggested to people that they wear a mask and that they socially distance, because he knew that this disease, this pandemic, this COVID-19 was airborne. He knew that it was more strenuous, to use his words, than the flu. Is there anyone that you're talking to that says, I just wish that he would have at least leveled with the American people on something as simple as the mask? Keep all the other rhetoric that he loves to lob to his opponents, but just tell the American people, you should really wear a mask, and perhaps we wouldn't be at this startling number that we are right now, almost 200,000 dead.
No, I've not heard that at all. And you have to remember who's here at the White House now at this point. What we're left with are the real true believers, people who believe in the president, many people who really understand who they work for. They're willing to accept the president as he is. And this question of what if that's a question that you're sitting around asking yourself constantly at this White House, you'll never get anything else done, because there are a lot of what ifs in this administration. What if the president had just let the Mueller investigation go forward? There likely wouldn't have been an obstruction investigation. What if he just focused on his trade policies instead of tweeting about porn star mistresses having a horse face? There's a lot of what ifs here, and what may have been lost in terms of the opportunities the president has had to capitalize on his successes and not sort of constantly step on those successes. So what if is not a question I hear a lot around here.
Paula reminding me of some of the president's classic tweets, for sure. Woodward is also facing some criticism, though, for waiting this long to reveal some of these recordings. After all, this isn't just about, the president and whether you like his style. People have died. Many people have died. And what's sort of interesting is the president is now using that same criticism as a defense. I'm going to quickly read a tweet from him from about an hour ago. Bob Woodward had my quotes for many months. If he thought they were so bad or dangerous, why didn't he immediately report them in an effort to save lives? Didn't he have an obligation to do so? No. And this is where the defense comes in. No, because he knew that they were good and proper answers. Calm, no panic. Has Woodward responded to those who have said, you should have said something a little earlier?
Yeah, he had a chance to respond to this criticism that really started to bubble up yesterday. The question is, Woodward, who is still associated with the Washington Post, should he have released this evidence sooner? These recordings reveal that the president was trying to downplay a deadly pandemic, and there have been questions about whether he had an obligation as a journalist, as a citizen, to flag this sooner. Now, he was asked about this yesterday by the Associated Press. He suggested that before he released these statements, he wanted to know more about the situation, that he wanted to know if the president's statements about the severity of the virus, if they were true. He also seemed to defend the timeline of his book, suggesting that it's not like he's going to drop this in December after the election. It's obviously coming out now. But those questions will continue to linger for him. And it's interesting that the White House has seized on this. I actually said to our producer, Kristen, when I walked in this morning, I said, I'm surprised that the White House has not seized on this criticism yet as a defense to say, hey, if Woodward thought it was fine and didn't need to release it, clearly it wasn't that bad. So when I saw that tweet, I said, yep, there it is. Of course, they're going to turn this criticism on Woodward directly and say, look, if what I said was so bad, why didn't he release it, right? To justify what the president said and to suggest that he wasn't, in fact, lying to the American people, that he was just trying to prevent fear, and whatever he said, as he notes in that tweet, just wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it is an interesting line of attack. And as you say, Paula, we've seen supporters of the president blaming everybody else but the man who is responsible by his oath of office to protect the American people. The president also released a list of potential Supreme Court justice picks yesterday. Senator Lindsey Graham, who I'll also note was the subject of attacks on Fox News yesterday for being the one who suggested, allegedly, to President Trump to sit down with Bob Woodward. Graham is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He joined CBSN yesterday, Paula, to talk to our colleague Lana Zak, and she asked him if he worked with the president's team on releasing the list. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, he did. I talked to his Pat Cipollone several times from the president. I said, the idea of putting the list out before the election, I think, is unprecedented but good. The next president can pick up to 2, 3, only God knows how many openings will come between 2020 and 2024. Mitch McConnell and myself, working with the president, we've done over 200 district court and circuit court judges and 2 Supreme Court justices. So this issue is important to a lot of voters. Putting the list out makes sense to me. I think it's a quality list. Now I would challenge Joe Biden to do the same. Let us know, the country know, who do you have in mind to pick from in terms of the Supreme Court openings if you get to be president.
President Trump also released a list of justice picks before the 2016 election, Paula. So on this new list here, there are a couple of members of Congress that are included in the list, including one who, according to Michael Cohen and the remarks he alleges in his book, the president smeared during the 2015 lead up to the 2016 election. Tell me about the list.
So I've been following this list pretty closely all week because it is enormously significant. We know, as you noted, back in 2016, the president really capitalized successfully on the death of Justice Antonin Scalia because he released a list of people that he would appoint to replace him or to fill other openings on the court. And the list, it was well vetted. It was crafted with the help of the Federalist Society. These were serious jurists who had a certain point of view. And it prompted a lot of voters, particularly evangelicals, to give candidate Trump a second look. And what we've seen in hindsight, and Major Garrett actually covers this really well in his book, Trump's Wild Ride, I think that it really was a turning point for him because folks were then willing to say, you know what, I can look past some of the rhetoric. I can look past some of the personal things that he says and does because he's really going to make a difference with conservative policies through the bench. And you know what? He has been extremely successful in doing that. He has appointed over 200 federal judges during his term, which is why this announcement was such a big deal. And I was told that we would see some establishment figures who weren't judges, like Senator Ted Cruz, one of the people on this list. And I'm told by the people who helped craft this, they were so very much hoping that this list would remind voters of how many federal judges the president has appointed and show them on this list. Look, some of these people are folks I've already put on the appeals court. I'm already stacking the pipeline. They really thought this would be a turning point. Their biggest concern was that it would be overshadowed by other news, which is why it was not released during the RNC. So it was so fascinating yesterday when the president held an event to read off this list, one of the most significant things that he's done throughout his tenure being highlighted, one of the most significant things for many of his supporters. And at the end, he opens it up to questions. And you know, none of the questions are going to be about the list. They're going to be about these bombshell allegations. It was such a classic moment in the Trump administration. He has a success. He has a promise made, a promise kept, future promises. And it's all just blown up because of something that he said. In this case, something that he said on tape.
Indeed. Paula, thank you so much.